Good morning, everybody. It's great to have you with us. Welcome to Message Live. Welcome to Message Mornings. It is a Friday, which means tomorrow is the weekend. Hope you've had a good week. Some of you, I'm sure, have been enjoying half-term holidays. It's great to have you with us. I read this week a survey that said 12.6 million people in Britain would go to court to challenge a family member if they felt they didn't get a fair share of their inheritance. 12.6 million is a quarter of the population, the adult population of Britain, would go to court if they felt they were left out in a will, if they didn't get their fair share. Legally challenge the dying wishes of a relative if they didn't get what they deserve. Would you do the same? How would you respond if you found out that your mum and dad had died and you didn't get a penny? Would you challenge it? I suppose one of the questions to decide either way would be how much is at stake and who got it instead of you. I read this. In 2014, the billionaire hotelier Leona Helmsley left instructions for her $4 billion fortune to be spent on caring for dogs. Having rethought an earlier draft that left it to the poor. Her 9-year-old Maltese, I think that's a kind of dog. Her 9-year-old Maltese, Trouble, as he's named, received $12 million in the will, with her grandchildren either cut out entirely or ordered to visit their father's grave annually in order to inherit their share. Oh dear. I have to say, I would have really struggled with that. Like, give it all to the poor, brilliant, I'm down with that. Give it all to dogs. If you know anything about me, there is nothing more demonic than a dog. So why would you ever give that amount of money away? I've just lost half the audience. I know that people are leaving from this room. It's hard not to want to challenge that kind of thing if that was the will of someone that you loved or had kind of served or been a family member of, and then suddenly $4 billion gets sent to caring for dogs. In Luke chapter 12, that's where we're going to be. Luke chapter 12 from verse 13, we get an odd little story that I want to draw our attention to this morning. Let me just remind you of the context. Jesus is touring villages and towns, and the crowd has been growing. Although the hostility against Jesus is growing, the crowds that want to be with Jesus are ever increasing, to the point where we're told there are thousands gathered. So many gathered together that they're beginning to trample on top of one another to get to Jesus. Some people just want to see him. Some people want to hear him. Some people need his teaching. Others want healing. But unusually, our passage, starting at verse 13 of Luke chapter 12, tells us about a guy in the crowd who just is there for legal advice. He says this, talking to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me," he says. "Someone has died and things have got messy. I presume money has not been shared out equally or fairly. One brother has received loads of inheritance and another hasn't got a bean." We've got no idea, though, what's in the will, but I imagine this fella is so distressed. The fact that he's gone to Jesus means he's really desperate. Super frustrated, angry, and outraged. I just wonder, how do you bring something like this to Jesus? Do you wait until he's finished all the miracles and then, hope you might get your moment? Do you wait in line? Was it like a line of people hoping to get their moment with Jesus, and then this is the one that got recorded? Almost like, when you go to the butcher's count and you're all taking a number, hoping that Jesus will call 128. And then you get your moment. Or do you stick your hand up like at school, hoping that at some point he'll go, it's your turn? Like, how do you bring something like this in? Do you jump in as soon as he's finished his sermon? Do you walk in front of him as he begins to leave? Or do you shout out to gain his attention, make a bit of a scene? And this is obviously a really big deal for him, because I reckon with all the thousands of people that want their bit of Jesus, this guy must have done something significant to gain the attention of Jesus. But it's such an odd situation. What has this guy's inheritance got to do with Jesus? Maybe this man realizes that Jesus is the real deal. Maybe he's heard about the things that he speaks about. Maybe he's heard that Jesus addresses injustices and thinks Jesus is the guy to fix this. Maybe he's seen him heal the sick or command demons out of people and therefore knows that the words of Christ have power and authority. Maybe a local judge is like, refused to take the case, doesn't want to help him. And so Jesus is the last resort. I've got no idea. But Jesus' response is fascinating. He says, man, who appointed me judge or arbiter between you? What? Like, this is a tough thing. Jesus says some really difficult things, but he addresses this guy straight to his face and says, man, who appointed me judge between you guys? You see the irony there, though? Jesus is the only Son of God. Jesus is called the righteous one who will return to judge the living and the dead. But as Jesus stands before him, he doesn't stand with the same authority that he'll one day carry when he's in his eternal form. He stands as a man, and in the sort of Jewish form, he has no authority. He cannot make a legally binding a rule or change that's going to stick. He has no right to step in. But I think there's more to Jesus' statement than just telling this guy he can't help him because he's not qualified. I think what Jesus is saying here is, this is not my job. This is not what I'm here for. There are so many other things that I've got to do. So many more pressing, more urgent, more essential things which I've got to get on with. That is my business. You'll have heard of the manifesto of Christ, those famous words from Luke chapter 4, when Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, the recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Do you see that great list, that wonderful list? And do you realize it doesn't include part-time legal advice, litigation, or probate work? It's not on the list of things that Jesus has been called to do. But Jesus takes this opportunity to take this guy's plea for help, and in that moment, he turns it into an opportunity to teach the crowd. He said to them, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. He takes this guy's legal matter and he instantly turns it into like an object lesson. And in the process, we learn something of the real motivation for this guy. Remember Jesus, he knows the heart and the mind of those around him. And as this guy begins to share his request, Jesus narrows in on the true issue at heart. It's greed that has brought this man to Jesus, not injustice. Watch out, Jesus says. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Man, if you're going to take anything from what I say, take the words of Jesus today and apply it to your life. This is true wisdom. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Tweet it, get it tattooed on your arm. It is incredible. To emphasize the point, Jesus then takes this thought and he begins to teach us with a parable. He says this: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I've no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? The farmer in this story gets like an ultimate bumper year. It's the greatest year on record, a massive harvest. He's never seen anything like it before. He suddenly has more than he needs. In fact, he has more than he can currently store. And so he decides he's going to knock down his barns and build bigger ones. Imagine how much grain you've got to have in order to think, I'll knock down what I've got, and I've got so much money I can build bigger ones, and with all this I can stick it all in there. Then I can hang up my boots, I can retire. Take life easy. But God is not happy. He calls him a fool because that same day his life will be taken from him. Super sad story. You suddenly get it all and it's taken away in that moment. Isn't it ironic? But you could ask, what did the farmer do wrong? Isn't it really good business sense? He's gone out and he's sown his seed and now he's got the bumper crop that he always wanted. What did he do wrong? Surely in the world's eyes, this is great wisdom. Surely it makes great business sense. Make hay while the sun's shining, almost literally. But remember, when Jesus teaches us, he's teaching us about the upside down kingdom. A kingdom that is not of this world, an inverse kingdom where the rules of the world and the sense of the world are turned upon their head. In the law of the kingdom of God, the farmer in this parable has made some fundamental mistakes. The man thinks he's responsible for the harvest. He refers to the harvest as his own, my crops, my surplus grain. He forgets that God created the land, that God controls the sun, that God controls the rain. I remember in the winter looking out over, out of my house and seeing kids playing in the snow. Beautiful scene. And that's great, isn't it? As they begin to throw snowballs at each other and all that lot. But then they began to take the snow off my car. Now, I remember looking out thinking, what are you doing with my snow? That's on my car. That snow is for my kids. Do not touch my snow. I know it makes no sense, but suddenly I'm getting territorial about the snow on top of my car. And yet I think I made the snow. I'm responsible for the snow. I control where it lands. I control how much falls. I control whether or not it'll be there in the morning for my kids to play with. Likewise, God is responsible for the harvest. God is responsible for the snow that lands upon my car. He's responsible for the harvest. God is responsible for its growth. It is God who has given him more. But the farmer thinks he's self-made. I've seen a whole load of clothing brand stuff at the moment with this title on that says self-made. It's really important, it seems, to this generation. I got myself here. I achieved all that I've achieved. Everything I have comes from me. The farmer thinks he's self-made. My barns, my grain. He's forgotten who provides. The man thinks he's in control of his life. He's convinced he can take it easy. He can enjoy what he has made. He thinks he knows what is the best use of his time. He doesn't ask God, what should I do with what you've given me? What should I do with the life you've given me? The farmer thinks that more wealth means more for him. That more crops means more money, and more money means more wine and more food and more fun. He doesn't ask, why have you given me more, Lord? Too often, I hear people ask, why is there poverty in the world, but yet we fail to ask ourselves why we've been given more than others. Let me say that again. Too often we ask why there's poverty in the world, yet we fail to ask ourselves why we have more than those who have little. He fails to ask God if God has a purpose in giving him more stuff. He just presumes that it's well-deserved, that he's the fortunate one, that he's the blessed, and the blessing is for him. Instead, he says to himself, I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Even that phrase, I'll say to myself. What arrogance is there that he thinks he made it all and that all of it's for him? I read this brilliant story about John Wesley. If you ever just want to get into like the life of someone who just like gave their life for Christ and his mission, some of the stories of John Wesley, that founder of the Methodist Church, are incredible. He saw thousands of people give their life to Jesus. A great preacher, a great church planter, author, songwriter. He is absolutely epic. Records show that as his ministry grew, he received ever-increasing amounts of money. Initially, he lived more comfortably and spent whatever he earned himself. And then there was this moment which changed the very nature and changed his perspective on everything. Let me just read an extract of what he wrote. He'd just finished paying for some pictures for his house when one of his chambermaids came to his door. It was a cold winter day, and he noticed that she had nothing to protect her except a thin linen gown. He reached into his pocket to give her some money to buy a coat, but found he had too little left. Immediately, the thought struck him that the Lord was not pleased with the way that he'd spent his money. He asked himself, "Will thy master say, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast adorned thy walls with the money that might have screened this poor creature from the cold. O justice, O mercy, are not these pictures the blood of this poor maid?'" Boom, whack, get in. He changes his approach to his finances. In response to the poverty of this woman, he knew that he could survive off about 30 quid a year, and therefore he could give away everything else. Records show that in year one, after deciding he was going to change, he received 30 quid. He lived off 28 and gave 2 away. Next year, it increased to £32. He lived off 28 and gave 4 away. Year 3, suddenly his income jumped to 90 quid. And so he gave 60 away. 1 year, near the end of his life, his income had increased to £1,400. And he lived off 30 quid and was able to give away £1,370, if my maths serves me right. Inspected by a taxman who was concerned or suspicious that he might be somehow storing up gold somewhere, he responded with this. He said, "I have 2 spoons, 2 silver spoons at London and 2 at Bristol. That is all the plate, as in all the metal I have at present. And I shall not buy any more, whilst there are still many around me that want bread." Like, see what his response is? I could buy more stuff, or I could give more stuff away. I just love this guy's heart. Because he knew who the provider was. He knew that God was in control. He knew that God was in charge. And he knew that God had purpose in giving him more and to enable him to bless the poor. How often do we live like this? We often think when an increase comes our way, that we somehow deserve it, that we've generated it, that we made it for ourselves. We worked for it, we earned it. And therefore we just like it because it makes life just a little bit easier. We think we can just add a little bit more here and there to make life better. How often we fail to stop and say, "God, why have you given me more?" I hear people say, "Why are there starving children in the world? And why does God allow that?" And yet we fail to ask, why do I have so much stuff? Why do I have an abundance? Could God's purpose not be to bless us in order to bless those around us? We think we are the destination of God's blessing, that we are somehow a cul-de-sac into which God's blessing comes up and then stays put. God's blessing reaches us and remains with us. It's just not true. We fail to realize that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and that we are to be the people he uses to bless the nation. We are called to care and to share. Care for what God gives us and share what God gives us. This is something I continually try and teach my kids. When they say, this is mine, 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 I ask them, whose is it? And they're well trained now, so they say it belongs to Jesus. And I say, and what does Jesus say we do with it? And they say we're to care for it and we're to share it. That kind of came back on me yesterday. We had some concrete put at the bottom of our garden because we're building something out there. And it was drying, and my son Alfie thought he'd test to see if the concrete was dry by doing cartwheels, 3 cartwheels on the drying concrete. When I found out about this, I said to Alfie, I said, who did cartwheels on my concrete? And he said, it's not your concrete, Dad. It's Jesus' concrete. He's right. And then he got a bit carried away and he says, and your glasses are Jesus' glasses. So are your underpants and your buttocks. And it got a little bit carried away. Although he's true, he had to be disciplined. That's had to happen. But we are called to care and to share, aren't we? We're called to take what God has given us, be great stewards of it. That means look after it and do well with it, but make sure we pass it on. We are called to care and to share for what God has given us. We, like that farmer, easily forget the Creator. We forget who provides all things. We forget He is the one that created us and gives to us in order that we might give away. But we focus on ourselves. We consider ourselves self-made and self-sufficient. We focus on the works of our hands and not on the hands of our Heavenly Father. We focus on the created and not on the Creator. But we are called to live lives, not for ourselves, but for others. Not to make ourselves ever increasingly more comfortable. You know what the truth is? You will never be comfortable. There's this survey that went out to many, many millionaires, asking them the question, how much more money would you need in order to be secure, in order to be comfortable? And all of them said, another million, another million. I'm like, $1 million? Imagine what I could do with that. You'll never be comfortable. You can never have enough unless you choose to see that all is from God and all is a gift in order that we might be a blessing and provide for those less fortunate. Not to store up enough to see out our days in comfort. Not to live like we're in charge. You know what? Because in that moment, our lives could be taken from us. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? What a scary thought. That you could spend so long trying to collect resource and then it all be taken from you. This is how it will be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. I absolutely love that phrase. That's such a fascinating phrase. How do I be rich towards God? What does that even look like? Rich towards God means using my earthly riches to show how much I value God. It means honoring God with what He's given me, recognizing that He is the provider. It means seeking purpose, God's purpose with my possessions. It means seeking His purposes with the skills that He's given me, with my time. It is the opposite of storing up treasures on earth. It means giving to whom God would have me give. And God turns me out and says, give all that I've given to the poor and to the needy, to the widow and the orphan, the refugee and the outcast. This is the beauty of the upside down kingdom, where we don't store up for ourselves, but we empty ourselves as Christ beautifully shows us. This emptying of even God Himself into the form of a man. And He says, imitate me. Empty yourself. Give sacrificially, purposefully and generously. We were made for God, not made for things. And so we serve God and not serve things. We store up heaven in our hearts and not stuff in our storage. And so I leave you with this question today. Why have you been given what you have? Why have you been given abundance? Why have you been blessed? Why have you, more than those who are poor and needy, find purpose in the great and generous God who pours out blessing upon his people? Realize the kingdom purpose, the upside down kingdom purposes of God, who says to his people, I will bless you. I will pour out in great abundance that you might be a blessing to those around you. Let's take seriously the teaching of Jesus. Let's listen to what he says in this wonderful parable. Let's listen to the warning not to store up or not to think that we made this all for ourselves, but to spend ourselves on behalf of the poor, to empty ourselves to bless those who are in need. I pray this was a blessing to you. I pray that it will be something that changes and shapes the way that you think. Be blessed. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.
You've been watching Message Live.
And we hope it's been a great encouragement to you.
Would you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook?
And ring that bell for notifications.
And thanks for watching.